storm surge is actually the number one killer in hurricanes, historically. This wall of water that moves inland, and it's unsurvivable. I mean, that's the reason we evacuate. When local officials call for evacuation zones, it's based off storm surge. And, here at the Hurricane Center, we have a whole unit dedicated just to storm surge and those values.
Hurricane season is from June 1st through November 30th. So kind of heading into that, and of course, with that comes not just hurricanes, but a variety of storms going on. And of course, truck drivers and other motorists can't always avoid those storms and those situations. And so here to speak with me about hurricanes in general, and then more specifically, what motorists, including truck drivers, could do is Larry Kelly, who is a hurricane specialist from the National Hurricane Center. Thanks for joining me today. Things I want to talk about, just probably some general stuff about hurricanes, and kind of jump into, what people can do if they find themselves into one. But I guess before we get started, maybe just do a quick overview of, like what a what a hurricane is. Like when does a storm like turn into a tropical storm and then into a hurricane, and kind of what causes that to happen?
Yeah, so I mean, hurricane's a low pressure system. Hurricane season starts June 1st, continues all the way to November 30th in the Atlantic Basin. So it's really a low pressure system. When thunderstorms begin to organize, and one of the key factors is there has to be a well defined center that these thunderstorms begin to wrap around. And as they get more and more organized, they feed off the ocean fuel, the warm ocean temperatures, in a low wind shear environment. So the thunderstorms get organized enough um, to then begin to increase in intensity. As we get to 39 miles per hour, uh, those wind speeds, then that's when you get the tropical storm. That's when you actually get the storm name. That's when the system actually gets named as a tropical storm. And then once wind speeds reach 74 miles per hour or greater, um, that's when you get the hurricane designation, and it keeps the name as well. So, um, you know, really, it's in that time frame, June to November. Storms can form on the fringes outside of the season as well. So it's just always just kind of as we move towards that June time frame, start to um, be prepared. This is
Sure.
the time that we start getting things ready for the season.
That actually kind of leads into my next question, actually, which was, I was going to ask when hurricane season is. And you said like June through the end of November. Question I have for you is, there's been, of course, a lot of talk about climate change and then how that affects, weather patterns and stuff like that. The question I have is, when it comes to that hurricane season, has there been an effect? Like, has climate change had an effect on that? Either in terms of has that the season has it expanded or shifted in time, or is it pretty much mostly the same as it has been?
It's mostly the same. We do sometimes have storms that occur before June 1st.
Sure.
Um, but for the most part, the majority of the storms do form in that June 1 to November 30th time frame. Now, there could be some that fall within or out, but the bulk of the season does occur, in that June 1 to
Sure.
November 30th.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And kind of keeping with that theme of climate change, other concerns that I've heard is that potential of it's increasing either the number or the intensity or perhaps both of hurricanes. So I guess my question is, what does the data show? Are we seeing more hurricanes, or maybe about the same, but more Category 4 and 5 storms? I mean, what are you seeing on your end?
Yeah, I mean, we've, starting to see some of the changes here. I mean, the number of storms may not completely change. You may have a little more in one season compared to the other. What we have been seeing is a little more rapid intensification with some of the storms getting a little stronger. The warm ocean sea surface temperatures, that, as I mentioned before, that's kind of what fuels these hurricanes to get going. So as the oceans do warm, it's just more energy for these systems to uh, potentially rapidly intensify into stronger storms. But as far as the total number, it could change season to season, a couple here and there, but we are seeing, with these warmer ocean temperatures, that this rapid intensification of those storms has increased in the past few years. It's just something we'll continue to monitor.
Sure.
Every storm's different.
Sure, yeah. The one thing that I noticed, and was like perhaps that we're going to see the the storms kind of maintain that tropical storm strength further inland than maybe before. I know we saw that certainly last year with Helene, and the damage that it did, in North Carolina and Tennessee. So, I mean, was Helene, was that more of an anomaly, or was it maybe signaling a possible, new normal to where these storms are just kind of like hanging there and keeping that intensity much further inland than they have before?
Yeah, so, Helene was a unique case.
Yeah.
Really, what people don't realize is Helene was moving very quickly up the landfall. I mean, it was moving 25 miles per hour, which is abnormal for a hurricane to be
Mm,
moving that fast, especially going that fast north. But as those storm, it was a strong storm, so it does take a little longer to lose its wind speed as it goes further inland. But it was moving so quickly. That's why the extent of those impacts were felt so much further inland, because it was really the forward speed of Helene. Um, Moving so quickly inland. That's why those wind impacts extended well inland. The rainfall was a combination of multiple things with Helene in North Carolina. You had the antecedent rainfall event happened before Helene even got there, so they had 6 to 8 inches of rain already before. You had the topography, so you just had a lot of factors already in that North Carolina area. Then you bring in a storm, it just amplifies those impacts. But Helene was a little unique because it was moving so much quicker than I'd say standard storms that in the Gulf, and it was a fairly large storm as well.
so this is one of those things that we can maybe not look too much into in terms of, you know what I
Right.
mean?
Every storm's different. Like if Helene was much smaller and moving slower, the impacts wouldn't be felt inland. So it really is storm specific, really on that speed and storm size, and then other factors as things kind of merge. Like Helene had there was a fault frontal system out where Helene was going to. So each storm's unique, but Helene was definitely one that was moving so quick at landfall. That's something we don't always see
Sure.
in the Gulf. Like I said, I think it was moving like 26, 27 miles per hour when it made land. So it just increases the awareness for that inland penetration. And really, it's an example of people that don't live on the coast. These storms, if they're moving quickly, they can extend inland and bring impacts in western North Carolina.
Yeah, for sure. Another side effect of hurricanes would be tornadoes. We see that kind of with that storm system, and as hurricanes get more intense, and maybe maybe they get further in, and maybe or not, but they're getting more intense. Is there a threat of more tornado activity as these hurricanes hit?
I don't think there's an increased threat with the intensity. Really, it's the outer rain bands that we usually
Mm,
see those tornadoes developing, and there's a couple factors in the dry air environment, just the overall wind shear environment of the system, where you get tornadoes that are, a favorable area for tornadoes. Excuse me. It's usually on that right side of the storm, that sometimes called the dirty side, and those outer ring bands where we get those tornadoes that develop. And it's really storm by storm. There's some storms that don't produce that many, and then there's storms like Beryl and Milton last year that produced many tornadoes. Usually, tornadoes with tropical systems are usually on the weaker side of the scale. EF zero
mm.
ones. Maybe every once in a while you get an EF2, but Milton last year was an anomaly where you had some EF2 and EF3 tornadoes within the state of Florida. So usually they're on the weaker end, but it is completely possible to get some stronger tornadoes within these systems. But just like I said, each system, the way it's interacting with the surrounding environment, can create a more favorable environment for tornadoes. And some,
Mm.
you don't really hear much about tornadoes with some systems. So
Sure.
it really is. It's another storm specific hazard that you have to be aware of, especially if you're on the outer fringes in those outer rain bands where you could see these tornadoes coming well ahead of the actual landfall of the system.
So the threat with the tornadoes is mostly on, as you pointed out, is on the outer edges of the storm system there.
Correct. It's usually on
Okay.
those outer rain bands on the right side of the system. So, if as the storm's making landfall, that dirty right front quadrant is what we like to call it. Is usually where those tornadoes are spawned
Oh,
uh,
okay. So,
as they impact.
so from what I understand, and stop me anytime I'm wrong here, but the most dangerous part of a hurricane is not the high winds, but rather it's like the intense rainfall and the subsequent flooding. So, I mean, what is it about hurricanes that make them so dangerous and so damaging?
Yeah, I mean, so the Saffir-Simpson scale, the category is really only tied to wind speed. There's many other hazards that from hurricanes. It's not just the winds. It's we've already mentioned tornadoes as hazards. In general, usually 9 out of 10 fatalities in with hurricanes is due to that water hazard that combined either storm surge or freshwater rainfall flooding. And as we kind of mentioned earlier, the warmer the atmosphere, the warmer the ocean, the more water that the atmosphere can hold, so you can see more and more heavy rainfall events occurring. So we always say the water, you evacuate from the water because that's what kills people.
Sure. And you kind of touched on something that I want to talk about, which is evacuations. I suppose the one I guess you can call it a good thing is that about hurricanes is that we are somewhat able to kind of predict when they will hit. Oftentimes, like days in advance. That kind of gives people time to evacuate and reroute their trips to affected areas. So, with that being said, what should particularly motorists, people driving, in your opinion, what should they do if they find themselves like in these hurricane zones? Like if they can't for whatever reason manage to reroute, or if they're in that area, like on that, on the nation's highways, for example.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, it's really important to pay attention to the latest forecast because forecast is changing. These evacuation zones are being called, up to 2, 3 days in advance potentially. So it's always, you want to stay up to date with the latest forecast. Listen to local officials where they're evacuating from. What we tell people is you don't need to evacuate hundreds of miles. You just really need to go. It could be inland, a few 10, 20 miles to go see a neighbor or something like that to get away from that water hazard, and then hide from the wind aspect of the system. So, with evacuation zones, motorists, I know I was talking about trucking. Obviously, you get a lot of congestion on the roadways, and we've had people that wait too long and then they get stuck on the roadways when the storm comes through. So it's really about planning ahead, knowing where you're going to go, and not knowing that you don't have to go 100 miles to a different state to evacuate. You could evacuate just inland, away from that storm surge or flooding area, and ride out the storm there. You don't have to go
Sure.
hundreds of miles away to completely get away from the system.
Okay, yeah. And that being said, are there any kind of like or misinformation about hurricanes you would kind of like to debunk? Right here on the record, is there anything that we kind of people think that they know, but they may not necessarily do not?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people think they if they've been through one storm, they compare it to a different storm. And then a lot of things happen in west coast of Florida. Charlie and Ian hit the same area, but completely different systems, completely different hazards that were associated with them. So you may experience one storm and think that you fared okay, but the next system is completely different. We say every hurricane is different than the previous one. So it's really important to listen to those local officials, not compare storms. Say, oh well, it was just a tropical storm and I evacuated and nothing happened. Well, this time little deviation in the track and you may be in the core of the hurricane. So that's really why we tell you people to, if you're asked to evacuate by your local officials, please do so and try not to compare storms to what you've been through in the past because each storm really is different and they all bring different hazards. We've kind of mentioned them here. Sometimes it's a freshwater flooding event, sometimes it's a storm surge event. It could be a tornado event for your community, or it's that high catastrophic, devastating wind event. So it really depends. Each storm is different, and they all bring different hazards.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of the key takeaway that I'm getting at least is that the one thing that we do know is that a big storm is coming. you know, and
Right.
we have a kind of a general path on where that is going to go. Outside of that, that's pretty much all we really know, right? Like as you pointed out, multiple times, like each storm is going to be different. We don't know what exactly the storm is going to bring. Only that it's going to happen in this general area, and then from there, we're just going to have to play it by ear.
Right. I mean, it is a risk, factor. I mean, we're talking about devastating, catastrophic impacts with, say, a major hurricane making landfall, and it's if you're in that warning area, you have the risk of experiencing hurricane force winds, or if you're in a storm surge warning, those that area is expected to get those values that the storm surge unit is putting out there. But little deviations in track can make a big difference. For example, if Milton comes in north of Tampa Bay gets a lot more water than when it did coming in just a few miles south. So and those kind of track deviations we can't tell you 2, 3 days in advance.
Sure.
So that's why you have to prepare because the risk aspect of what you know we're not talking about a 10% chance of rain and you're going to take an umbrella outside, you might get wet. We're talking a major hurricane, your house may be destroyed. It's a different kind of risk factor there. So that's why you really need to prepare and take the advice of those local officials when you're told to do so, and prepare for the storm. And really, preparedness starts now before the hurricane season even comes. So you know what to do if you do have to deal with the storm this season.
And what kind of preparations would those be? Is there anything that kind of stands out?
Yeah, I mean, as we get closer to June 1st, having your hurricane preparedness kit, having your food to be able, medicines, and things like that, having, are your storm shutters, are they working? Because sometimes they take time to prepare. Are you insured? Do you have all your insurances up to date and those kind of things? Do you know where you're going to go if you're going to be called to evacuate? Do you even know what your evacuation zone is? Those are things that you can start being prepared now, have your plan in place so that, when you see that tropical outlook or that storm being named, you're not trying to figure out in the 3 to 5 days before the storm actually impacts you. You kind of have your plan, you have your supplies. You're not, running to the gas station and going to the grocery store. You have everything in place, and you know what you're going to do if you're called to evacuate. So, um, getting those things in line now just prepares you for the season ahead.
All right. I think I hit on everything I wanted to. Is there anything that I missed that you might want to add?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we kind of talked about how every storm's different. The time to prepare is before hurricane season, not when you're staring down the barrel of a storm. And hazards impact different areas, and what one hazard you might have gone through one storm may be different than the next. So, um, we I kind of mentioned it a little earlier. Hurricanes are only categorized based off the wind speed, but we mentioned 9 and 10 fatalities from these storms are actually from the water, and it's not factored into the category at all. So heavy rainfall, storm surge are the leading cause of deaths, and just be prepared for the season to come.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time. Thanks for speaking
Yeah,
with me today.
yeah, no problem. Have a good one.
All
Thanks,
right.
Tyson.
All right. Thanks.